Welcome back to Trending Now USA, I'm Bella. What happens when the future of tennis meets the present queen of the sport on one of the biggest stages in America? And more importantly, what does that moment reveal about the direction of women's tennis in 2026? The possibility of Alex Eala facing Iga Świątek at the Miami Open has set the tennis world on fire, not because it's just another match on the schedule, but because of what it represents. Over the past few days, speculation has been building around a potential clash between Alex Eala and Iga Świątek at the Miami Open 2026. Draw projections, ranking movements, and early round wins have placed them on a possible collision course. It hasn't even happened yet, and still, conversations are exploding across tennis forums, sports networks, and social media timelines. That alone tells us something powerful. This is not just about a match. It's about momentum, symbolism, and the shifting balance of power in women's tennis. Let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Alex Eala has been steadily building her presence on the professional tour. From her junior Grand Slam success to her breakthrough performances against higher-ranked opponents, she has become more than a promising name. She represents a new generation of players from regions that historically haven't dominated women's tennis. For the Philippines, and for Southeast Asia more broadly, Eala's rise is deeply meaningful. She carries not only her racket, but the expectations of a nation eager to see itself reflected on the global tennis stage. On the other side stands Iga Świątek, a player who has already carved her name into the sport's modern history. Multiple Grand Slam titles, dominance on clay, and a reputation for mental resilience have made her one of the defining athletes of this era. Świątek is not just a top-ranked player, she is a benchmark. Facing her is not simply about trying to win a match, it's about testing whether you belong among the elite. If these two were to meet at the Miami Open in 2026, it would be more than a contest of forehands and backhands. It would be a symbolic passing of the torch moment, or perhaps a reminder that the torch is not passed so easily. What makes this potential matchup so compelling is the contrast in experience and trajectory. Świątek entered the professional spotlight at a young age and handled it with remarkable composure. She embraced sports psychology, openly discussed mental preparation, and built a team that prioritized long-term growth over short-term hype. Her success was not accidental. It was constructed piece by piece, with discipline and clarity. Eala's journey has been different. She has had to navigate not only the challenges of breaking into the WTA elite, but also the added layer of being a trailblazer for her country. In today's media environment, young athletes are no longer allowed to grow quietly. Every win becomes a headline. Every loss becomes a debate. Social media amplifies everything. This is where the analysis becomes more interesting than the match itself. In modern tennis, mental pressure can be as decisive as technical skill. The idea of facing someone like Świątek on a big stage such as Miami carries emotional weight. Miami is not a small event. It's one of the premier tournaments outside the Grand Slams. The atmosphere, the cameras, the crowd, all of it magnifies the moment. For Eala, a match like this could serve as a measuring stick. Not necessarily in terms of scoreline, but in terms of belief. Does she see herself as a challenger or as a contender? There's a subtle but important difference. Challengers hope to compete. Contenders expect to win. For Świątek, the pressure is different. When you're the established star, you are expected to win. Anything less becomes a storyline. That's the paradox of success. The higher you climb, the narrower the margin for error becomes. Facing a rising star like Eala could be tricky, not because of rankings, but because hungry players bring unpredictability. They swing freer. They have less to lose. The tennis world is hungry for rivalries. Since the era of Serena Williams began to fade, fans and analysts have searched for defining matchups that can anchor the sport. Świątek has already been part of key rivalries, but the emergence of younger players like Eala adds fresh energy to the narrative. However, we need to be careful not to romanticize or overburden young athletes with storyline expectations. One match does not define a career. Yet, in the age of viral highlights and trending hashtags, it can feel that way. Social media plays a huge role here. Before a single ball is struck, clips, predictions, and bold takes circulate online. Fans dissect practice footage. Comment sections fill with debates about potential upsets. For Eala, this visibility is both a gift and a challenge. It builds her global brand. It increases sponsorship interest. But it also invites scrutiny. Athlete privacy in 2026 looks very different from what it did a decade ago. Every training session can be recorded. Every emotional reaction can be clipped and shared. Players are not just competing, they are constantly being observed. The line between public figure and private individual has blurred. Swiatek has spoken in the past about the importance of mental boundaries. She has emphasized routines, controlled media access, and psychological support. That approach has likely contributed to her consistency. The question for rising stars like Eala is how to build similar protective systems while still embracing the exposure that modern sports demand. From a tactical perspective, this potential matchup would also be fascinating. Swiatek's heavy topspin, court coverage, and tactical discipline contrast with Eala's evolving aggressive baseline game. But beyond tactics, the match would test emotional pacing. Who manages momentum swings better? Who handles a hostile or partisan crowd more effectively? Miami, in particular, adds another layer. The diverse fan base, including a strong Filipino-American community, could create an energetic environment for Eala. At the same time, Swiatek has developed a global fan following that travels and shows up loudly. Crowd dynamics matter more than people realize. Energy can lift a player or overwhelm them. There's also the broader cultural dimension. Eala's rise reflects the globalization of tennis. The sport is no longer concentrated in a few traditional powerhouses. Training academies, international competition, and digital access have expanded the talent pool. A potential Eala versus Swiatek clash symbolizes that evolution. A Polish champion facing a Filipino trailblazer on American soil, watched by a global audience. The commercial aspect cannot be ignored either. Brands love narratives. Established champion versus emerging star is a marketable storyline. But commercialization brings another kind of pressure. When endorsement deals, appearance fees, and media obligations increase, recovery time decreases. Mental fatigue becomes a silent opponent. One of the most overlooked aspects of modern tennis is how young athletes process criticism. A single off-day performance can trigger thousands of online comments. Some supportive, some harsh, some deeply personal. Learning to filter that noise is almost as important as mastering a serve. If Eala were to lose convincingly to Swiatek, some voices might say she's not ready. If she were to push the match to 3 sets or even win, others might prematurely crown her as the next superstar. Both reactions would miss the point. Development is not linear. Great players grow through layered experiences, not viral moments. For Swiatek, matches like these are part of maintaining legacy. Each season adds chapters to her story. Facing rising players keeps her sharp. It forces adaptation. Dominance in tennis is never permanent. The tour evolves quickly. Staying ahead requires constant reinvention. What excites many fans about this potential matchup is the sense of transition. Tennis is in a phase where new names are challenging established hierarchies. That tension creates drama, not in a sensational way, but in a meaningful, competitive way. Another layer worth discussing is national identity. For Eala, stepping onto a court against a top-ranked player carries symbolic weight back home. Young Filipino athletes watching that match might see possibility. Representation matters. It changes what feels achievable. For Swiatek, carrying Poland's sporting pride has become part of her identity as well. She has embraced that responsibility with maturity. In many ways, this hypothetical Miami showdown would be a meeting of two athletes who understand that they represent more than themselves. Let's also consider scheduling and physical demand. The Miami Open sits in a busy part of the calendar. Travel fatigue, surface adjustments, and minor injuries can influence performance. Sometimes the outcome of a high-profile match is shaped as much by cumulative exhaustion as by skill. And yet, the anticipation remains strong.
Why?
Because tennis thrives on moments where trajectories intersect. A rising star challenging a reigning force captures imagination. It invites debate about readiness, resilience, and evolution. But beyond the tennis court, this conversation touches something deeper about modern sports culture. We expect young athletes to mature instantly. We celebrate them loudly, then critique them just as loudly. We follow their training routines, relationships, and social media posts. The emotional bandwidth required to navigate that environment is enormous. In that sense, a potential Alex Eala versus Iga Świątek match at the Miami Open 2026 becomes a lens through which we examine our own expectations as fans. Are we patient with growth? Do we allow space for setbacks? Or do we demand constant progress and immediate results? As a commentator, I find the human dimension most compelling. How does Eala prepare the night before such a match? How does Swiatek frame it internally, as just another opponent, or as a meaningful test? The psychological narratives unfolding behind the scenes are often more complex than what we see during rallies. And let's not forget the role of coaching teams. Modern tennis is collaborative. Strategy meetings, video analysis, fitness planning, all of it shapes performance. The match may look individual, but preparation is collective. If this clash happens, it won't simply answer the question of who is better on that day. It will offer insight into where women's tennis is heading. Is the gap between the established elite and the rising generation narrowing? Are we entering an era of greater parity? Even if the match doesn't materialize exactly as predicted, the conversation itself signals something important. Alex Eala is now being mentioned in the same breath as Iga Świątek in the context of major tournaments. That alone reflects growth. In closing, this potential Miami Open showdown matters because it reflects transition, ambition, and resilience. It reminds us that sports are living stories, constantly evolving. For Eala, it could be a stepping stone. For Świątek, it could be another affirmation of excellence. For fans, it's an opportunity to witness a chapter that bridges generations. And beyond tennis, it speaks to a universal theme: the courage it takes to challenge established greatness and the discipline required to remain at the top. That tension between ascent and dominance is what keeps the world watching. This is Bella, and you're watching Trending Now USA.